Guitar Will Travel, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. With your host, me, James Patrick Regan, otherwise known as Jimmy from the Delines. And today I was speaking with guitarist, songwriter, and novelist Willy Vlautin of the Delines. In our conversation, Willy talks about living north of Portland, Oregon, and growing up in Reno, Nevada, and playing in cowpunk bands, and how his older brother turned him onto the guitar. Willy talks about writing songs at an early age to help him escape the edge of Reno before he became entranced by it. Willy tells the story of stealing his mom's VW to drive to San Francisco to see bands he loved, and then driving back after the show to have his mom's car back at 6 a.m. Willy talks about gear, starting with the Gibson Sonex when he was a kid, and then Gibson SGs and his father's nylon string Martin, all which were hard to find because Willy's left-handed. Willy also talks about his amp, a Milkman. Willy describes his bands, Richmond Fontaine, and his current band, the Delines, both that Willy is the primary songwriter. And finally, Willy describes his career as a novelist. To find out more about the Delines, you can go to their website, thedelines.com. That's TheDelines. And to find out more about Willy's novels, you can go to willyvlautin.com. That's WILLYVLAUTIN.com. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and most of all, review this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And please support Vintage Guitar Magazine and all the wonderful things they do for us guitar players, because guess what? They do so many wonderful things for us guitar players. Here's my buddy Willy. Hey, Willy.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Where you at?
I live 30 miles north of Portland, Oregon, in a outside a little town called Scappoose.
Okay. It's so in Washington.
No, Oregon has a lip to it.
Okay.
Like a little lip, and if you're going up on the east side of the Coast Range towards Astoria, you'll run into Scappoose.
Okay.
It's the first little town north of Portland.
How do you?
So where are you at?
I'm in Napa, California.
Yeah, man.
How do you pronounce your last name?
Vlautin. Vlautin. Yeah.
So how's it going?
Good, man. I'm looking at the Dwight Yoakam. I can't see everything on your back.
Oh, you know what? Let me see if I can do this without messing you up much. But so just lots of crap.
Yeah.
Posters from shows I played. And then it just gets worse on the other side. So this is like a little woodshed area that I have a band, and this is where we practice. And so all this gear rolls out, and there's a drum set back there that you may or may not saw. But yeah.
Oh, that's bad, man.
So did you grow up in Reno?
Yeah, I lived in Reno too. I was 26 or so.
Uh-huh.
And then I was in kind of failed kind of cowpunk bands all the way through there, and then Portland bands started coming through Reno, playing this little bar, and I saw a band called Cracker Bash who were 10 times better than any band in Reno. And they were really cool guys, and they said, hey man, you should move up to Portland, it's really cheap, and they have basements that you can practice in. All the houses have basements. And I worked at a trucking company, and they transferred me up to Portland, and I kind of stuck it out here.
Oh, right on. And were you playing music? When you were? I mean, you mentioned the cowpunk bands, but like how early on were you playing music in high school?
Man, I started writing tunes. I think I was 11.
Wow.
Yeah, my brother was 4 years older than me, and he was kind of a folk songwriter and high school guy, and he kind of turned me on to playing guitar, and he said once, he goes, man, you're such a sad little kid. You seem so sad all the time. Why don't you write songs about it?
Yeah.
And I did, and I fell in love with music real young. Is it just as an escapism? The idea of disappearing into a song and suddenly you're not home anymore. You're not at school anymore. You're living inside some world, and I got addicted to that real young.
Yeah. And what was Reno like in basically the 70s? What was Reno like back then?
I mean, as a kid, I didn't know much better. My mom hated casinos, and but as I got like 14, 15, 16, and I started getting an edge on me, At the time, Reno had over 100 little motels within a mile of downtown Reno.
Yeah.
And about 80% of those were weeklies, were a lot of like guys our age, like middle-aged failed men or guys that with drinking problems or gambling problems or just falling on hard times, either mentally or financially, would end up in these motels. So I was around that a lot, and I always thought I would end up like that anyway.
Uh-huh.
So it was I fell in love with that side of Reno.
Yeah.
I fell in love with the darker side of it, and I liked boozing. I was, as a kid, I liked hanging out at old man bars and having talks with some, toothless, tattooed dude that just got out of prison. And I don't, I know why I did that. I mean, I had a big edge to me, but that aspect of Reno always kind of stuck with me. And now that's a small sliver of the town, but it was the sliver that made the most sense to me. And so I loved Reno more than anything. That era from, say, when I was 18 to about 26, that was some of it was a hard time personally, but romantically, it was like living in a Reno Tom Waits song.
Sure.
And it was just heaven for a guy like me.
You mentioned your brother said you were a sad kid. Were you a sad kid?
Oh yeah, man, I always had a big edge on me. I was writing sad sack 6-minute long folk ballads at like 12, 13,
Wow.
Yeah, I had a big edge. Well, some of that's just home life, some of that's genetic.
Yeah.
The whole soup of that. But yeah, man, I struggled as a kid.
Yeah. Was your brother playing music?
Not anymore, but he did. He played like in like little folk places once in a while. Or he used to play at an Italian restaurant we used to go to, me and my mom.
Oh wow.
But he was smarter than me, man. He's always been smarter than me, and he gave it up and moved on.
Uh-huh.
But he was the big inspiration for me. And then when I was 12, 13, he moved to Los Angeles.
Okay.
And started, and so that was like 81, 80, 81. So he turned me on to X and the Blasters and Los Lobos and Rank and File, and so all that kind of Long Riders, all that kind of Cowpunk stuff.
Yeah.
I was 13, and I loved it because
Lone Justice.
Yeah, man, I used to carry that woman's picture in my wallet all through high school.
Maria McKee.
yeah, man, she was so cute, and I cut out a little picture of her, and then I taped it, with clear tape, so it was like laminated.
Yeah.
And I must have kept that till I was 19 or so.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw her a couple times. I used to take my mom's car from Reno to the Bay Area to see bands in high school. So my mom had a VW Bug.
Yeah.
And I would tell her, man, I'd go, hey, I'm going to go spend the night at this buddy of mine who lived on a ranch outside of Reno.
Uh-huh.
And I'll bring your car back by 6 a.m. because she'd go to work at 7. And she goes, okay. And I would take that car and I'd drive it all the way to San Francisco. And that, a VW Bug, man, you're lucky if you can go 55.
Exactly.
And you're going over the Sierras going like 30.
Yeah.
And then I would go see, like, I saw Rank and File, I saw Lone Justice that way, the Plimsolls.
Yeah.
And then I would drive all the way home just to get and I barely make it by 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. You probably went to Slim's, I'm guessing, to see some of those
No,
bands?
man, I went to the Stone.
Oh,
it was always the Stone. Kind of North Beach had a Stone there, or the Berkeley Square.
Yeah.
Those were the two places. I never went to Slim's because that was kind of bigger, and all the bands I liked at the time, were like smaller time bands, I guess.
Yeah. Were there any clubs in Reno that you were going to back then?
There wasn't. The one thing Reno did have when I was in high school was a band called the Boston Wranglers, which were basically like a cross between the Byrds and, say, the Blasters, or they were kind of punk rock leaning guys, but
Sure.
but they were really influenced by the Byrds, and so I guess you did a band like the Long Riders.
Yeah.
So I used to go see them, and I used to just say I worked for the high school newspaper, so I could get into the club, and I just sit by the sound deck, by the sound booth, and see them, and they were really nice to me. My whole life, those guys were nice to me. But no, man, there wasn't much going on. Reno was at the tail end of casino bands. Casino bands were just starting to fall out of favor when I was in high school.
Sure.
And most other bands were metal. It was a pure metal town. Van Halen was king.
Yeah.
But the Boston Wranglers, they did their own tunes, and people liked them. But they were the only band I really remember, really gravitating. There wasn't a lot going on in Reno. So my big dream was San Francisco. Every Sunday the Chronicle, the pink section of the Chronicle.
Yeah.
I'd look for bands I liked, and that's how I kind of found out about most of the bands I knew about. My mom would pick me up the Chronicle.
Right on. And was it tough finding? You're left-handed. Was it tough finding a guitar in Reno?
Because this is before the internet.
Yeah.
So, my brother found me when I was 12. He found me a Gibson Sonex.
Oh yeah.
Which isn't the nicest guitar. But then, man, when I was 19, I got my first credit card. And my mom said, buy a record or something, but then pay it off and build your credit up.
Yeah.
And I literally, man, I'd had that thing less than a week, and it had an $800 limit on it.
Uh-huh.
And I went to this place called Bazaar Guitar in Reno.
Greg Golden.
And they had a left-handed SG.
Oh, right on.
And I didn't know they made left-handed SGs because back then you don't know anything. You can't figure out anything. And I just sat there staring at it, and I go, "Oh my God, a left-handed SG!" And I wanted it so bad. And then and I went home and I stayed up. Literally, I slept maybe an hour that night, thinking like, "You're not a good enough guitar player to have an SG.
Oh.
You need to be practical. Your mom says, pay off your credit card bill." And I went back and I was so scared, dude, that the guitar would sell in that 5 hours I wasn't at the store. Yeah. That I ran back there. And I think they opened at 11, and I was, sitting in the parking lot at like 10:30, and I bought the SG with the credit card, maxed my credit card out, and Jesus, did I learn how easy that was to do over the years. And I bought that Gibson, man, and I still play it. I play it in the Delines every night.
Right on.
And when I was in a band for 23 years called Richmond Fontaine, and I used that about half the time, and then I was so in love with that Gibson that I'd get scared taking it on the road, and so I'd leave it home. Uh-huh. But when you leave it home, it's just like sitting under your wife's bed, and she's sitting there with it, so it's safe. But then it's like sitting under the bed, and then when you get home, you're like, "Oh, you poor thing, you just been hiding out under a bed." You're sleeping under a lady's bed. It's still you're sitting alone. And so I started taking it out again with Fontaine, and then with the Delines, I just play it every night, and I hope to God no one steals it. And
exactly.
'Cause it's better than that than staying at home with the guitar. So that's always been one of my prized possessions is that guitar. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you were playing with Richmond Fontaine, what were you using for amps?
I used, man, in the early days, I used like a Marshall, I think it's a JCM, I want to say 600. It was like their version of the Twin.
Okay. All right.
And I'd have it on like, one, and it would be blaring everybody. Yeah. But it looked cool. And you could literally drop it out of a van at like 50 miles an hour, and it would be fine. So it was just a workhorse. And then I just played deluxes.
Okay.
Most of these deluxes.
Yeah.
Thunder Deluxe. And then
also a loud amp.
Yeah.
So are you using your deluxe now with the SG?
No, I just bought a Milkman.
Okay.
Like a TV40, and I was on the road, and this band was playing with us, opening up for us, and the guy had a Milkman and a TV40, and Jesus, man, like the reverb on it was so beautiful, and you could articulate it and change it subtly, and oh man, I just fell in love with it. And it was another one of those things where you'd stay up late at night going like, a $3,000 amp? I don't know. You're not a good enough guitar player to warrant an amp that good. And then the bad side of me would come up and say, well, but that reverb, you could live inside that reverb for the rest of your life as a happy man.
Oh,
so
yeah. And you use that reverb. Did you use that on the new album?
Yes, parts of it. Yeah.
You hear the reverb in the opening song.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with the Delines. Just feels like a reverb band.
Yeah,
and that kind of clean, almost surfy kind of sound. I thought always fit the Delines. Yeah. But yeah, man, with that amp, I had to pre-order it, and so I almost canceled the order like 5 different times. But I have a lot of I do that a lot where you don't think you deserve something, and so you
need to get away from that. You can't feel that way.
Shit, man, I'm a little old. I've been trying to beat that mother after my whole life, man.
So tell me, I don't know anything about Richmond Fontaine, so tell me about that band. What was that band all about?
I moved up from Reno, and then I didn't know anybody in Portland, and I worked graveyard shift at a trucking company out in like a, kind of like a nondescript part of Portland, and it rained all the time, and I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to working graveyard, and it was good. It was like a union job, so I had money, but man, it was a combination of being in the biggest city, not knowing anybody, and it raining all the time. That I was starting to write even, kind of more, pretty dark kind of country folk tunes. It was during that time of like grunge and like mid '90s and hard like punk, post punk kind of stuff. Yeah. And I was really influenced by like Husker Du and the Replacements and all that. So Fontaine kind of started as like a cowpunk version of the Replacements, really, or Husker Du. And I wrote like uncatchy, really story-oriented songs. I was always writing story-oriented stuff, and I cared more about the lyrics, and I cared way more about like the structure of the story than I cared about people listening to it. Yeah. And so my band would go like, man, what? Could you write something catchy? Could you write something that people might like? And it took me a few years of that, but we were great pals, and I met all those guys in Portland, and we were really good pals, and so they kind of stuck with me, and I kind of learned to try to write catchier songs, and not so much story oriented, and I was a big ballad guy, I loved ballads, and so I was writing ballads in a time when everybody, like the big Americana kind of craze came up in that time. And I was just writing these kind of weird ballads. And then when my band would get disgruntled, then I'd write either a rock tune or like a boom chita boom to appease them. And then I guess around 2004, we were just kind of running out of gas as being a band that no one really liked. And we've been a band for, like 7-8 years by then. And so I said, I kind of woke up, I said, I better try to write a catchier record. And then we met J.D. Foster, a really cool, he played on that Hillbilly Deluxe record. Bass player for it. Yeah, of course. And he was nice enough to produce a record we called Post to Wire. And, and we painted, the band painted and helped remodel this guy that owned a studio, Larry Crane, who's a really brilliant guy and a really cool guy that owns Jackpot Studios in Portland. He'd just gotten married, and he wanted his place totally repainted and redone. And so we did all that for studio time, and so we could afford JD. And then JD came out, and we cut that record, and that record turned out to do okay in Europe. Then we had like another 10-year run of just hitting Europe, like 3-4 months a year sometimes.
Yeah. And the Delines, you guys sound more R&B based. At least the with the tunes I heard.
Yeah.
Sort of old school R&B.
Yeah, so I did a record. Well, Amy Boone, the singer of the Delines, was in a band called the Damnations.
Okay.
Out of Austin, Texas. It was her and her sister, and it was Americana, kind of, cowpunky kind of stuff. Really cool band, and I love them. And we toured with them a handful of times with Fontaine.
Okay.
And then her sister sang on a couple of records of ours.
Okay.
And then her sister got pregnant when she was going to tour as a part of Richmond Fontaine, and she couldn't go. So Amy went instead.
Okay.
and that's how, I'd started. I heard one night we were doing a radio show, and I heard Amy, we were singing like a ballad on a piano, and I was in the control room, and I could hear her, and she didn't know it was a hot mic. And I heard her sing, and I said, Jesus, I want to grow old, in a band where she sings all the songs.
Yeah.
And then I could write ballads for her, and just live and die by these kind of big ballads. And so after that tour ended, I didn't say anything to her that day. And then after the tour ended, I maybe wrote her songs for almost a year without telling her and tried to figure out like the sound that would fit with her voice and the ideas behind the band, like lyrically. And then I sprung it on her. I sent her like a CD with 4 songs on it, and a little thesis on why she should join up.
Yeah.
And and then she flew up. She lived in Austin, Texas, and she flew up to Portland, and I put a band. Me and the Fontaine drummer Sean Oldham put a band together, and we practiced maybe 2-3 times and cut the first record. And people seemed to like it, so we kept going.
Yeah.
But I wrote, for me, man, it was like taking the handcuffs off, songwriting wise, and I always liked those big kind of country soul ballads.
Yeah.
And her voice fits that kind of stuff, like Sam.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like the Delines was really influenced by like certain records by Sammy Smith or Bobby Gentry, those kind of Dusty Springfield.
Yeah. But how long ago was that when you put that band together?
2014.
Okay.
And we had a couple big layoffs. Amy got really hurt. She got hit by a car in Austin, Texas, and was down for a couple years.
Oh, no.
Oh, man, it was awful. It was so awful for her. And then, and then COVID. So we've been a band like 10 years, but we've only been kind of working, I don't know, 5 or 6 of that.
Okay. Do you out playing all the time?
No, we tour exclusively at this band. We tour Europe. We'll do some local gigs, but like we're about ready to go out for, I think we'll do about 3 months this year.
Oh, wow.
Touring.
In Europe?
Yeah, in Europe only, yeah.
Wow. What kind of venues are you playing in Europe?
It depends. Sometimes we play bigger places. It just depends, man. Some nights we're playing like really fancy, like theater, and then the next night we'll play some kind of smaller, kind of folk club.
Sure.
It just depends. It depends. But
you guys aren't booking yourself? Do you have an agent that handles all that?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. We have like a management and all that over there. It's pretty cool. We fly in, and then we have our driver named Jan, who's like the coolest dude, and he does our sound too. And so he just picks you up with a van full of gear, and then we just do the tour, and then we all fly home.
Right on.
It's a heaven for me, man, because I love hearing Amy sing, and it's a really cool band. Like Corey Gray is a keyboard player and trumpet player, and he's like our resident genius. He's like such a great player, and my favorite bass player around is Freddie Trujillo. And I get to be in a band with him every night. And then Sean Oldham is the drummer. And he's a band leader, and I've been playing with him for over 20 years, and he's 25 years really. He's the coolest dude ever, man. So it's a lucky outfit.
Right on. And when you do play in the States or around town, what venues are you playing around town?
Like just clubs, like 200 feet kind of places.
Like the Star and...
Yeah, like Star Theater.
Yeah.
We just did a gig at the Polaris. for our kind of music, like a seated kind of place probably does better.
Sure. Yeah. 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 So you have the SG. What else do you have for as far as guitars? I saw you playing a Martin. It looked like a D18 perhaps, but I don't know.
Well, I have like an old Martin. Probably my favorite guitar is is an old Martin. It's like Willie Nelson's, same era. His Trigger.
Yeah.
It's like 1922, I think, and it's just a nylon string. It was my dad's guitar, and I never lived with my dad, but when he died, I asked his wife if I could have this guitar he had in his closet. And it was he bought it at a pawn shop in Reno, in like the 60s, I think, and it has like patches. It has like 4 different patches on it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really beat up, and it took a lot for them they switched it over lefty for me, and then just to get it like working again, it costs a lot.
Yeah.
But if you're just playing like cowboy chords, it's heaven, and it's probably my favorite guitar, and it's light. It's like the lightest guitar I've ever held because it's paper thin.
Yeah, yeah.
It's probably my favorite guitar. Sounding wise, it's temperamental, and I love it because if you don't play it a lot, it goes out of tune a lot, and it kind of yells at you for not playing it. And when you start playing it a lot, then it's just like heaven. So, and then I have a Martin DM.
Okay.
Man, there was a guy I met in Seattle, and this again kind of before the internet. He was disgruntled when George W. Bush was first elected.
Yeah.
And he said, "Man, I'm getting out of America," and he did. He moved to Portugal back before. Now there's a line 5 miles long of people wanting to move to Portugal.
Sure.
But he'd moved there, and he goes, "Look, you want any of my lefties? You want to buy any of my lefties?" And so I bought a Martin DM from him, which was kind of their first kind of low budge.
Yeah.
Guitar, and I probably used it on most of my records. It's a perfect guitar, and it's a workhorse, and I love it. So I bought that from him, and then the only other really cool guitar I have is this one. It's like a 1969 SG.
Yeah.
Lefty. That a buddy of mine kind of hit it big. Is a restaurateur.
Okay.
Tour. And he's the coolest dude, but he was a musician first, and I used to work for him painting houses before he was a big famous restaurateur.
Okay.
Named Andy Ricker, and he had a restaurant chain called Pock Pock, and they were amazing. And he's one of the coolest dudes I ever met. But he was good buddies with the Richmond Fontaine guitar player and me. And when he left town, he bought each of us a really nice guitar.
Oh, right on.
As a friendship present, man.
Yeah.
So he goes, "Hey, can you come over to my house?" And I said, "Okay." So I go to his house, and I thought maybe he had cancer or something, because it was kind of like a serious, like, "I need you to come over to my house."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh shit, I hope he's okay." So I go over there, and there was this left-handed SG sitting there. He goes, I'm leaving town, and I just wanted you to have this because you're my buddy. And it was one of the nicest things that's ever happened. And so this one never leaves the house, but I write all my tunes on it.
Oh, right on.
Or majority of them.
Yeah.
So those are my guitars. I'm not really a collector of guitars because I don't think I'm a good enough guitar player to be a collector.
Yeah.
But I do have some nice guitars. That's true.
Right on. Right on. Do you use the Milkman around house, or do you have a different amp that you use around your house?
I use the Milkman. I write a lot of my tunes just electric, unplugged.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I just do. I'm always trying not to bother like my wife, and I always get self-conscious.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess it's just from years of like. When you're a kid, your mom's pounding on the basement. She lived above me, and she'd pound on and I lived she'd pound on the floor. Roommates, girlfriends, everybody's kind of pissed at you for, just sitting in a room all day.
Banging on the guitar, yeah.
And then, so I just kind of got quieter and quieter. And then weird sort of way, that's what got me writing novels, is you don't bother anybody writing a novel. You can just kind of disappear and do your thing. People think you're nuts, but they don't. But they don't. You don't annoy them.
Yeah. Are you more well known as a novel writer or as a musician, do you think?
In the U.S., way more as a novelist, I would think. And then in Europe, it's probably 50-50.
Okay. All right. And do you tour around doing like, book tours and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I Napa, man, I don't know. I do the Bay Area a lot. Like I go to Green Apple Books.
Okay.
Or City Lights.
Yeah, of course.
Cisco. Orinda. I did Orinda Books last round. I do Book People. So yeah, I have a little circuit that I'll hit.
Right on. And if people want to find out about the band or your novels, where do they go to figure that out?
I mean, there's if you can remember my name, man, it's just a website, willyvlautin.com, and then you can just look online and figure all that stuff. Yeah. All that stuff's on.
What about
all the books?
What about the tour dates for the band?
Yeah, that'd be the Delines.com.
Oh, okay. I know. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Willie.
Yeah, man.
I hope I get to meet you in person here pretty soon.
Yeah, that'd be really cool, man. I like that a lot.
My brother lives in Portland also, so.
Oh, no kidding.
Portland's a big town, though. No, he's a flight attendant.
Oh, man, so he's smarter too. He's got benefits and a retirement plan, and he gets to fly around for free.
Exactly. Not like us.
No, man. I know if you could have your insurance taken care of, as all Americans should have health insurance.
Sure.
It would be great. That shouldn't take a weight off to not have to pay for your own health insurance for the amount of money that we have to if you're an independent contractor kind of worker.
Exactly. And especially you're much younger than I am, but as you get to our age, the things break easier.
It break easier and it's more expensive.
They're definitely more expensive.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Willie. I
appreciate talking to you, man.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah, see you later. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Have Guitar Will Travel. You can catch up on all the things I'm doing at thedeadlies.com, and I'm on all the social media platforms as well. And please support Vintage Guitar and all the wonderful things they do, because they do many, many wonderful things for us guitar players. Thanks. Please subscribe. Please tell a friend, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.